So thanks for hopping on. For all of you that are able to, we do have a lot of people running AEP appointments, so probably going to be a lower show today, but definitely want to, since we have a smaller group, would love to have you guys engaging a little bit more. If you have any input, we're all here to kind of learn from each other. So if you have any input on different questions that you're utilizing to uncover a problem and provide a solution for your clients, please let us know. I know Hadley, I know Jared, Lindsay, Jay. I'm not sure if any of you else have been in life insurance or health insurance for over a year, but if you have and you have good questions, please input. So again, today, just going over some questions. I want to start off by saying I feel like a lot of people have a bad perception of sales representatives, and we all know why. They probably had a past experience that wasn't so great. So we kind of have to understand from our client's perspective that if we're trying to push something or if we're coming off too salesy, they are going to have their guard up, and it's going to put them down a path of not wanting to trust you, not wanting to move forward. And the best way to kind of break those walls down is to get them to talk. You can't tell to get someone to buy. You have to listen and understand their situation. And plus, it makes it so much easier on you to be able to find a problem and feel like you're solving it rather than just pushing a product or pushing something without even knowing what the client is genuinely trying to solve. So to the first question I always like to ask, if I'm it doesn't matter, in-home, telesales, whatever you're doing, I always like to ask, so, Hadley, what was the reason that you were motivated to fill out this form? Just kind of fill me in on what was the reason you were looking to get this type of coverage, whether that be just a generic life insurance, final expense, or mortgage protection. It really doesn't matter. You can reframe that question however you need to for whatever sale you're trying to make. But you do want to ask them, what is the reason that you were motivated to fill out that form today? And then you're quiet. That's another thing too. A lot of people have issues is the awkward silence that you have to endure to get people to answer the question, but you got to do it. When you ask a question, you're silent. You're waiting for a response. I've listened to a lot of trainings and I've listened to a lot of live calls, and there people will ask a question, and then if there's too long of a pause, then all of a sudden now they're saying something else, or now they're trying to answer the question for the client, and that's not going to get you anywhere. There's no reason to even ask the question if you're going to answer it for them. So, Hadley, if you want to do a little role play with me, just because I know you're the most engaged one right now, but if I were to say, fill me in on what motivated you to fill out that form. What was the reason you're looking for this type of coverage?
I was just curious to see if it was affordable to protect my family.
Okay. And when you say protect your family, what do you mean by that?
I just want to make sure I could leave some money behind for them if I died anytime soon.
Okay. So you're ultimately just trying to make sure that you can leave money behind for your family. Was that what were you trying to leave it behind for? Do you have a large amount of debt that you're trying to make sure that they don't have to take care of? Is there income replacement? Are you trying to leave behind money for funeral expenses? What was the money that you're leaving behind supposed to do for them?
Kids are going to college, and I got a mortgage, and there's no way kid's mom would be able to take that over and pay for school without my career in place.
Okay. And why is that important to you?
I grew up with no money, struggled real hard growing up, and that's not a burden I want my kids to have to shoulder.
Awesome. I definitely understand why you filled that out then. So just to kind of recap, you guys, when you ask a question, don't just ask it just to get an answer. Ask it with the intent of, genuinely listening and probing. So when he said, leave money behind, I'm like, okay, what are you leaving the money behind for? Probing questions are gonna really get them to, or lead them to where you want to go. So if you're just asking the question to ask the question, it's probably not going to do the purpose. So if if you get something, you get a generic answer, keep probing. And then that's a really good one. And if here, I can type them in the chat too, like the main question. So the first one was, what motivated you to fill out the form? And then the second one was, why is that important to you? And you saw just with Hadley's, role play, it's a perfect example of when you ask, why is that important to you? A lot of the times they're going to tell a story. And, if you're selling final expense, a good question to ask after that is, if something were to happen to you, who would be in charge of the funeral expenses? Now, if you're selling mortgage protection, if something were to happen to you, who is going to be the one that's taking care of that mortgage bill if you were to pass away? It's a good way to get like the beneficiary without being like, who do you want to protect? I've heard that question a lot, and I have like a lot of trainings, people have said that. Who are you trying to protect? I just don't think it's the best way to frame that question. I think it's good to say like exactly what they're looking for. So if it's final expense lead, it's like, if something were to happen to you, who would be in charge of those funeral expenses? Because then it's really framing, instead of it just being like, oh, well, my daughter, I'm trying to protect my daughter. It's like, who's going to take care of the funeral expenses when you pass away? Because that's what the life insurance is going to do. So, like
What
I
does
said,
it look like for you if we don't get some kind of coverage like this put in place? Can you paint a picture for me what it would look like for your family without a plan put in place?
exactly. Yes. And I literally have that written down next to paint the picture, because a good way to get that, out of them. So they say, who's going to take care of the funeral expenses? Hadley says, probably my oldest daughter. Okay. So if you were, Hadley, let's just play out a scenario here. If you were to have passed away yesterday, now you're a ghost today and you're looking at your family. What is the situation for your family financially that they're going to be in if you are no longer here? What does that look like for them?
My kids would be in some kind of government housing or have to be adopted because my family don't have the means to provide for them.
That's
That's
definitely, I mean, that's a perfect scenario of like what most people, their situation is. And I know a lot of people get uncomfortable asking it, but like people don't buy life insurance when they're comfortable. They buy because they're uncomfortable thinking about their family in a financial bind because they didn't pay a small monthly fee to give their family money so that they're not in that situation. So yeah, it's hard to make them uncomfortable, but if you're not challenging them, you're not making them uncomfortable, and you're not bringing out emotion, you're just going to be a transactional, here's a quote, they're going to go call another life insurance, get another quote. Like, you're just going to be a very transactional representative. And to how to gain a client for life is when you pull out that emotion where they're really thinking about it and they're like, you know what, there's nothing that I want to do more than to make sure that my kids don't have to go into a government housing because I didn't move forward with something that I needed to do. So let me make sure I write these down for you guys. So the first one was, what did you fill out the form? Why is that important to you? If something were to happen to you, who would be responsible for X? I'm just saying X because like I know some of you are running mortgage protection, so it's just like, who's going to be responsible for that mortgage, that monthly mortgage payment if it's mortgage?
I'm really huge on saying when something happens to you or when you die, because you're either just going to outright
I like
die
that.
or you're going to get sick and die slowly. It's one or the other. I hate to break it to them, but like when something
Yeah.
happens to you, Michaela, like you didn't come home yesterday, what does that look like for you? And I think if you get two people on an appointment, like especially for mortgage protection, like if I ask you, like, Michaela, what does it look like for Gage if he passes away today? Like he died and didn't come home today, and Gage answered, I'd totally like, hey, Gage, you're a ghost. You died. Like,
Yes, that's what I do too. I'm literally like, nope, like you're no longer here. You
yeah,
Like that is, it's really uncomfortable, but if you guys haven't done, if you have done that in a home, like you can feel like the urgency build up just from that question, because when when they're sitting there looking at each other like, oh shit, now what are we gonna do? That builds that urgency of like, we need to get this taken care of because we really don't have a plan. And that's like what you could, the next question to ask is like, if you, when you die, what's the situation like for your family? You can say, so what is your plan currently? And you can get them to, pull out, oh, well, I have a policy with the bank. Oh, well, that's probably an accidental death plan. Oh, I have work coverage. Okay, perfect. That's great while you're working, but that's just a rental policy. So we want to make sure you have something that you own and is going to go to your family no matter what happens in the event of your death. So following that question about their situation, you want to ask what their current plan is so you can dig out those they're going to throw something out there because they're going to feel guilty of like not having a plan. So they're going to probably throw something out like, well, I have this or I have this, and you want to make sure that you're ready to respond with, okay, that's great, but let's really dig in on what that plan is, so then when we leave this conversation or this appointment today, you guys have a plan in place and you know what that's going to look like. The next one I like to ask is, what would change for them?
yeah,
And why I ask that is because if they say, well, my wife probably won't be able to afford the home, so she might need to, move in with a family member. Okay. And have you talked to your daughters about that? Would they would have a room available and they would be readily available to take in your mom? And they're not gonna have discussed that type of thing. A lot of people don't want to discuss, the passing of their mother, their loved one. They're not gonna have that in place. And the reason we're doing this is we're just trying to dig out more of their situation and create urgency. If we were just telling them like, oh, so you don't have a plan, so I assume you're gonna do this, this, and this, that's just giving them the easy way out because you're answering the question for them. But when you pause and you let them answer and they don't have a plan, it's really pushing the urgency of why you're there to help them today. And now you're solving a problem rather than pushing a sale.
yeah, it's good.
Now, let me see where I'm at. Why is that pretty? Okay. This is a mortgage protection question I like to ask. Where's your family going to live if something were to happen to you? Just to probe into like, okay, now what are they going to do if they can't afford the home? That's kind of same kind of question of what's going to change for them, but that's a good way to frame it into a mortgage protection. And then this is a really good one to ask. I ask it in the beginning, but you can ask it throughout. It's completely up to you of how you can put it into your presentation. But I always like to ask, so when is the best time to get protection for your family? Because that's kind of framing yourself, because if they say, oh, I want to think about it, when you ask that question, when is the best time to get protection for your family? And you educate them about how life insurance works, rates go up based off of age. If something were to happen health-wise, you could no longer get coverage. When you educate them and then you ask them that question, they're going to say today. When would be the best time to protect your family?
Yeah,
Obviously today, you know? So that's a good question to kind of push out well, I really wanted to think about it. Oh, well, remember when we asked like when would be the best time to get this protection in place? And you said today. I think that we need to make sure that we get this in today because you didn't have a plan before, and I'm here to make sure that you get a plan in place and you feel comfortable that when we leave this appointment, your plan is set for your wife to take over the home, or your plan is set for her to cover the funeral expenses. The next one is, what do you want to happen? when I ask this, I'm really wanting to figure out, because if there's someone that's like, oh, I mean, I don't know, I guess I just want my wife to go get another boyfriend and figure it out. You know, like if they make a joke or if they're just trying to like push you away, I'm automatically chalking it up as like, maybe this isn't, because I'm not here to tell someone how important it is to protect their family. So if they kind of throw up something out there that I don't really care, I'll be dead. Oh, just throw me in the ditch. Ugh. Like those types of things, I'm like, nope, those aren't the type of clients I want. I will challenge them, but if I don't get the response that I want, I'm on to the next one. I'm not going to waste my time trying to convince them of why it's important. So if they're not answering the question with something that's genuinely like, well, I would love if like, you know, my wife could stay in the home, she could make sure to pay that mortgage, the kids would be able to go to college. You know, if I were to ask that question to Hadley, he's going to say, you know, I would love that my kids would be able to be successful even while I'm gone. They have money to go to school, they would have a place to stay, whatever the case may be. But when you ask them that question, it's really pulling out what type of client you're speaking with and how important their family genuinely is to them.
A lot of people too, like they may crack a joke like that just because that's their personality and way of dealing with something when they get uncomfortable. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people will laugh or make a joke about being uncomfortable. And that's a real good chance to like step back and just say, Michaela, you know, is this really just not important for you to protect your family at this time? Or are you just worried about it costing too much?
Right.
And really get their objection out of the way. And it's like, well, yeah, we're just worried about it costing too much. And then you get a good chance to like pre-close them. And you can ask them like, well, Michaela, then if you're just worried about costs, is there any reason at all that if we could find something that covers your family's needs and fits in the budget, is there anything that would keep you from see if we can get you approved today? And like if that's a yes, then you have a chance to move forward and carry on with your conversation. And if it's not a yes, well then clearly that ain't your client and on to the next.
Exactly. And that's, thank you for that, Hadley, because that's exactly what I mean by, you know, when they make a joke like that, it is probably just because they're uncomfortable and that's their like coping mechanism. But if you don't challenge them after that and you just laugh with them, then you're taking their family as a joke too. And like, you don't want to be that. I used to do it all the time. I'm speaking from my own experience because I never liked to make people uncomfortable. Like my whole life, I've always like wanted to make people comfortable and wanted to make people happy. So when I'm making people uncomfortable, it's like uncomfortable for me. But so a lot of the times when they would make those jokes and I would just laugh, I wasn't doing them a service. I was just doing it because it made me more comfortable to laugh at their joke when really I should have just challenged them exactly like Hadley said. Okay, you know, I understand like this is an uncomfortable topic, but you know, this is very serious and I understand, you know, your family is not going to throw you in a ditch, you know, Hadley. We know that your family's not going to do that. So let's just think about this for a second here and really dive into why this is important to you and challenging them on that. And when it comes to the close, that's kind of what you led into, Hadley. I always like asking this question. I'm like, so how is it going to make you feel knowing that you put something in place that will outlive you and protect your family even past your years on earth? That's like a good closing question because obviously we can frame any statement into a question and it gives them an opportunity to respond and open up more. So how would that make you feel knowing that you put something in place that will outlive you? You know, that would give me that would offer me a lot of peace of mind knowing that my family's going to be okay, even if I'm no longer here. Great. That's what I'm here to do today. And if it's the opposite, like let's say we're not getting much out of them, we don't think we're going to close it, you can throw this one out there. How would your family feel knowing that you could have put protection in place for them, but you didn't?
Another thing I'll be saying too, I'm gonna cut you off. I
No.
always tell the clients too, my job today is to find something that fits your budget and your needs. and nothing more. All right, because if you find something that doesn't fit your budget, what's going to happen is you're going to cancel in 6 months, and I can lose my license through the state of Texas as well, and I definitely don't want to lose my license. So, well, like I said, today we're going to find something to fit your budget and your needs, and the job not take no food off the table today. And they're like, okay, and they keep on going.
Love that. Yeah, that was exactly kind of how they, so that proves for you guys, you know, two top performers are both asking a similar question of, you know, is there outside of, if we were to be able to find something within your budget today, is there any reason that you wouldn't want to see if you could qualify?
I see people's work coverage being one of the biggest consistent objections, because most breadwinners that are working really use that coverage, but products tell and stories sell. And so, like, Michaela, your work coverage is definitely going to pay out. Like, you know, if you just died instantly of some kind of car crash. But what happens if you get cancer and they lay you off and you no longer have the coverage anymore, like one of my last clients? You know, a lot of people, they get injured and then they can't work, and then their employer lays them off and they don't have that coverage anymore. They get cancer and they can't go into work, and next thing you know, like 2, 3, 4 weeks later, they're finding a reason to lay them off, and then they're sick, they're paying money for their treatments, their savings, retirement account, anything they got dwindles, and then they die with nothing. That happened to one of my last clients. Like, how would your situation look if that happened to you?
I like that.
You
Yeah.
know? So,
Telling stories, even if it's not your story, just
yeah.
make up a story. Because
Someone else's, everyone's got stories. Like, grab a scenario from every single like agent if you don't have one. You know, like, I have so many stories now just from like helping clients, but I still steal other people's stories when I don't have one to plug into that person's scenario. And or like Michaela said, make something up that is relevant so you could explain it to a kindergartner, so
Yeah.
they have that like eye-opening reality, like, yeah, I'd be screwed, or my family would be screwed because I won't be here. Like, yeah, it's
absolutely. Now, I'm kind of hopping all over the place, but I know this is recorded, so we can go back and listen if you need to. But one that I like to ask too, if I'm selling final expense, is I always like to ask, like, have you recently lost someone, or have you had to pay for funeral expenses for one of your family members? And a lot of the times they'll say, you know, oh, I did lose my mom. Yeah, we had to kind of create a GoFundMe, and now you're pulling that emotion out again, because now they're reliving that scenario. And it's like, see, I completely understand. You know, my boyfriend's grandma, I've seen both scenarios. My boyfriend's grandma had coverage and then his grandpa didn't. The scenario where he had coverage, it was a lot. Everyone was there, able to grieve. Everybody was able to celebrate his life. It was a lot smoother of a transition to be around family and not have to worry about a bill. I had his grandma passed. She didn't have coverage. His mom literally lost her apartment, could no longer afford her apartment, was bouncing around couch to couch, trying to pay $8,000 for the cremation. Like, this is a true story. And this is genuinely what families go through when you have someone that isn't educated and doesn't understand that is going to be a large bill for their family. So if we don't take an educational approach and we don't ask these questions to pull out the emotion, you will leave families in a really, really tough spot. So it's okay to challenge them. It's okay to make them uncomfortable, because you have to think about the beneficiary and the impact that you're going to make by offering the services that we do. So tell a story. You know, you've probably had a scenario where you've had a family member that had life insurance or didn't have life insurance, and just tell the story. Really let them feel it.
Yeah.
So I already asked the closing ones about, you know, how is it going to make you feel knowing you put something in place that will outlive you, or the opposite, how would your family feel knowing that you could have gotten protection for them, but you didn't? So those are like the closing ones. Anyone else have any questions that they like to throw out there? Whether it be beginning, middle, end of the sale? Anyone else have? I know Jay kind of gave some, Hadley, you've given a couple, but anyone else?
I'll throw an objection at you. Oh, I already have life insurance.
Okay, perfect. So what was the reason you filled it out? Were you looking to get more coverage, or were you just wanting to make sure that you were put in the correct risk category?
I was just curious to see if there was a better deal.
So you're just shopping around and make sure that you are in the best price for your situation?
Yeah, I'm just shopping around right now.
Okay, great. And then I would just lead into just saying, well, I'm actually a broker. Am I the first person you've spoken to about this, or have you spoken to a couple different agents?
I spoke to a couple different agents, but the price wasn't much better.
Okay. Well, the good news is I'm actually a broker, so I can be an advocate for you and actually shop all the top rated carriers here in the state of Florida. So no need to continue to get phone calls or continue to shop around. I can do all that work for you. All I need to do is go through a little bit about your health and figure out if the policy you currently have is if we could beat that, or if there's a little bit more coverage that we could get for you. So I always like to ask that question in the beginning. If, I'm like, am I the first person you've spoken to, or have you been kind of looking around and speaking to a couple agents? It's a good way to get out that. I know Hadley mentioned shopping around in the beginning, but like if he didn't mention shopping around and he was just like, I'm just trying to make sure I got the best rate. Okay, perfect. So am I the first person you've spoken to, or is this something you've been looking for a while now? Then you figure out, are they someone that's shopping around? Because if they are someone that's shopping around, you really want to pin that, like you want to stop that right there. Like, I'm a broker, I'll do the shopping. I know you're probably getting annoyed because you've gotten a bunch of phone calls because you are shopping around, but I can actually be the one that shops around for you.
I love the planting the seed of disbelief. So like I'll kind of like flip the role here real quick. So like, all right, Michaela, you already got some coverage in place. Glad that you know this is important. Who's the carrier you went with?
It's a Mutual of Omaha.
Okay, that's a great company. And what are they charging you a month?
$42.50.
Oof, why so much?
I
Are you
don't know.
or have you had a heart attack or you have cancer or anything in the last few years?
No.
Well, we're definitely going to solve that problem for you and cross compare that to all the plans available in your state. Now, I have a 1:30 slot tomorrow and a 3 o'clock that I can do that for you. What works better for you?
I like that.
And you see, like, now they're like crapping their pants because they're like, oh, they put me with a company that like sick people go with. And like when you know, I don't care if it's $9 a month that they're paying, like I'm still gonna be like, whew, like someone just hit me in the stomach, like, ugh, why so much? And now they're like, oh shit, because agents, they do make commission, Michaela, when you buy insurance, and they don't always put you in the best plans. But don't worry, we're gonna solve this for you tomorrow. I got a 1:30 or a 3 o'clock. What works better for you? And then just like go into closing them on it and tying it down. But that gut punch and the ultimate, like asking them, why are they charging you so much? Like, why are you paying so much? Are you sick? Or you got a heart attack? Or Mutual of Omaha? And you always acknowledge their company too as a great company, because then you're just trying to sell them. But like Mutual of Omaha is a great company, Michaela, but I only use them like 5 or 10% of the time when my clients are like ill or injured, and they definitely cover that. But you don't have any health issues, so let's make sure we can find you the most affordable plan. So, and then, yeah, that seed of disbelief there, though, is like, I think the best ammo I've ever had personally.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because a lot of the times, you guys, if they already have a policy, like I know as a new agent and maybe someone that hasn't done it enough, when you find someone that already has a policy, that's a win in my mind. I'm not like, oh, they already got it. No,
Right.
I'm like, great, because they already understand, you don't have to sell the importance of life insurance. They already bought it. They understand the importance of it. So now I'm just figuring out like, okay, were you just trying to make sure that you had enough coverage to, get enough of what you're looking for to leave behind for your family? Or were we just trying to make sure that you weren't put into the wrong, I always say the wrong risk category, because I took that from Pauline. I liked that because it's like that's genuinely what happens. People get put into waiting periods that are perfectly healthy. People get put into, you know, a standard rate when they could get a preferred rating, and that's the risk category. And it just kind of sounds smart. And so people are like, okay, she knows what she's talking about. Like, oh, are you just wanting to make sure you're put in the right risk category for your health? And you're
Yeah.
not overspending. So that
And
is,
were you taking any additional medications when you first got that policy, or was there any like significant change in your weight or anything recently? Like just a few things to like really reiterate, like maybe they weren't put in the risk category, or if
yeah,
they were, maybe they can get something better now because circumstances have changed.
absolutely. I literally, that Sentinel policy I sold last week, that was exactly what happened. He got the policy, he had a policy about 3 years ago. He was chewing tobacco at that time. He no longer chews tobacco. So I was like, well, we might as well, we'll put you down as a non-smoker since it's been over 12 months or 24 months since you've chewed. And we were able to get him 3,000 more in coverage for the same price. So it's like, it genuinely is a lot of people's scenarios. So when someone says they already have a policy, don't change your demeanor, don't get down. That's a positive thing. Like, okay, awesome. I'm glad you got something taken care of. Let's go ahead and make sure that you are in the best rate for your current situation.
Straight up.
So I think that's all I had in terms of the questions. A lot of the time we can just exactly like Hadley said, like he reframes could have been a statement but turned it into a question. So instead of us like telling our clients like, oh, well, this is what this does, this is what would you like this policy to do for you? What it's like just framing however we're saying things as a question and genuinely listening to them. Don't just ask the question to, you know, have a response. Genuinely listen to what they're saying so that way you're going to feel less salesy. They're going to feel less sales pressure. They're not going to categorize you with every other car salesman. You're going to be put into a category of solving problems and genuinely trying to help people rather than trying to push something.
Yeah.
So I think that's the overall, you know, objection for today was just like making sure you guys are framing any type of scenario, any statement into a question and really probing in rather than just asking the question and moving on to the next, like really probing into it. A lot of times people will say, I'm looking for 100,000. And if you're not asking, okay, and why are you looking for 100,000? Did you have 100,000 left on your mortgage? Was there a reason you're looking for what was the 100,000 going to do for you? Oh, well, I just figured that was a good number, you know, to leave. Yeah, that's like now you're figuring out that like there's no reason to have 100,000. But if you found out it's a mortgage, now you're gonna figure out, okay, how do I make sure they have enough to cover the mortgage? But you got to just keep asking questions when people throw things out there instead of just going back to the script and saying something right back at them.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, so also too, just how you said about the mortgage protection, they want 100,000. I just did a client, but I just got paid on it, which I'm finna send the money back, but it's my fault, because I know the value of a whole life policy, what it does. You get Baltimore Life as well, right? And I explained it to the husband, but the wife spoke Spanish, right? So there was some type of communication there, and he was communicating. So we ended up doing the whole policy. The husband loved it. He explained it to it, but then the next following day, the wife said, "No, we don't want it. There's not enough coverage in place," right? But I showed them the numbers, stuff like that. But I knew that he wanted more coverage. But at that time, okay, well, at 20 years, you're not gonna have this coverage anymore, or 30 years, you're not gonna have coverage no more. And they're young, so we lock it in now. Yeah, 150,000, right? So that ended up happening. He's like, "Yeah, I agree with it." So I thought everything was on board together, but it really wasn't. So you just gotta know what the spouses. Make sure the spouse knows as well. Even like if you need to call someone that speaks Spanish or whatever type of language, make sure that everybody's on board, because me and the husband was on board, but the wife wasn't really on board. She would just shake her head like this. So, but we're gonna replace it with, they wanted 500,000 a return policy because she felt more comfortable doing that, right? So, yes, I know the importance of giving the whole life policy, and it makes more sense. And in my mind, it makes more sense. It does, but also if there's like pushback, give the client what they want. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
And that's,
don't go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, you finish.
I'll say just give the clients what they want. If they have a mortgage in 30 years and they just want to have this and they lose all their money, and you explain that to them multiple times, what's going to happen, and they still don't want to budge, give it to them. And you
Yeah.
did your job, which you're supposed to do, right? Or you could be in a position like me, which I know this is what this is. I know you say you 100,000, but there's no 500,000, but there's no need. You don't even make close to 500,000.
Exactly.
But let's get this taken care of first, and we're gonna work our way up. The way I normally do it. But so I learned from that situation, like, okay, cool. Okay, I know what this is, but if they want this, go ahead and get this, so you don't have to backtrack and do all this other extra work. So.
And that's where like you could have just reframed as like, now you're solving a problem. So he said, okay, it was for the mortgage. Okay, I completely understand. Now there's two types, and you take the educational approach, there's two types of policies we could get here. We could get a term policy, which most people do get to protect mortgages since your mortgage is on a term. Whether that be, while your kids are still young, making sure their college is taken care of while they're still young, that's a term scenario. Or there's a whole life where it's never going to expire on you, you're locked in, but it is going to cost a little bit more just because it is guaranteed to pay out to your family, whereas a term, that it's going to cost less, but it's due to the carrier hoping that you outlive the term and they don't have to pay the claim. So there's two scenarios we can go with. I'll let you decide, but then you give them the two options. So then you're less pushing something on them and they're choosing what they want, but you took the educational approach of like, hey, you could go this route, it will expire on you, and we would potentially need to get more coverage after that. Or we can go this route, it's going to be more expensive up front, but you're locked in for life.
Yeah. I don't know how many people are genuinely listening when there's videos off. I mean, if you're in the bathroom or driving, totally understandable, but I'm talking to new agents specifically here. Because we just want to know that we're actually using our valuable time and that you guys are sponging this up, that we're just not talking to a bunch of blank screens and people aren't really listening. But I really want to, I help new agents really understand this. And I see one of the biggest mistakes that new agents make is they don't know how to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like they ask close-ended questions or yes or no questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I can put a few examples in the chat for you guys, but I could ask Michaela, would it be hard for Gage if you died yesterday? And you would say yes or no, and that wouldn't be very much information, and that wouldn't strike your emotion. But if I ask you, can you elaborate on what your situation would look like for Gage if you died yesterday? Can you paint a picture for what it would look like if Gage died yesterday? Can you help me understand what your circumstances may be if Gage died yesterday? Can you expand upon what your situation is going to look like? So you can really swap out a lot of those words.
Yeah.
And that's going to have Michaela have to tell me details. Can you help me understand? Can you paint a picture? Can you expand on? Can you elaborate on? Those are great ways to ask open-ended questions because it's going to get people to really talk to you and the words come out of their mouth, not yours.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, because that's so true. You want to ask open-ended questions when you're trying to get more information. But when you're booking an appointment, a lot of times you want a closed-ended because you want them to just have a straight, this is the answer. You are asking the question because you know the answer to it, rather than an open-ended when booking appointments. But in the appointment, when you're trying to gather more information, create emotion, you want to ask open-ended. You want them talking. Everyone's going to trust you more when they're talking rather than you talking.
Another thing I think too, like just being a student in this business. Ask Michaela. I don't know if Michaela is around Gage a lot, but I call Gage every day.
Oh, yeah, I hear your calls all the
I
time.
be calling Gage every day. Even Jared, I call Jared almost every day. Asking question, doing this. Even when I get out of a home, I'm calling. Even if I close, I'm still calling. The majority I'm closing. Majority, I'm gonna close that motherfucker. I ain't lie to you. But I'm still calling and see what I can work on. Just because like I could learn multiple things, like just
Yeah,
keep
I
on
feel like it's not a
building and
failure
growing.
learning, but if you're failing and just, all right, well, I didn't make a sale, on to the next. How are you
Yeah,
learning from that?
Right.
can't keep on doing the same stuff. Like, yeah, if you're producing $2,000 a month or 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever that you're producing, but if you want to get to the next level, you got to be a student. Like Hadley. I remember Hadley. I mean, sheesh. You know what I mean? Like you grinded, but you got into them books and started learning more and more, get on those calls, and now look at you closing those bigger deals. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but now you teach other people how to do this stuff as well. So, but because you're being a student, a lot of people they want to make a lot of money, but they don't want to be a student, or they don't want to put the work in. They say, "Well, this don't work, man. This stuff works." If you ain't buying leads, if you trying to do friends and family all day, good luck. It only work for so long. But if you go buy leads and you work your leads, it gonna work. They work. All these leads work. Leads are just leads. They're not sales. But
Yeah.
so they're not sales. And then like me, I I spent $800. I spent $800 on leads last month. I turned that to $15,000, $15,000. You know, like, but that's a good profit. But I worked the shit out of my leads though. Like I dial them, I work them, I door knock them. You know what I mean? I don't like spending money. Michaela will tell you, I do not like spending money on leads. I do not. That's the first thing I hate doing. But I know I have to, so I try to minimize it because I work them.
And
Yeah,
you see it as an investment too, not an expenditure. Because when you look at
100%.
you're spending money, then that's something that you're blowing that ain't coming back, whereas something that's an investment, it's going to require either your time or your resources. Money comes and goes, but your time always goes and it doesn't come back, so and it's the easiest part to discount, you guys, but the personal development, like get a study buddy, find someone else that's like new like you or in the same point in your career as you, and find a book together and have somebody to converse with, because you only remember 10% of what you passively hear. You actually retain 50% of what you write down, or you're actually reading, excuse me. You retain 50% of what you're reading. You're going to retain about 70% of the stuff that you take notes on, but we actually retain 95% of what we teach. So if you read something, you take notes on it and then teach it to someone else, you literally just wired it into your neurology. And that was the only way that, like, reading those books and understanding stuff, like if you guys truly plan to be here in 3 or 5 years from now, like this ain't just your kind of stepping stone to the next job that you're going to, really pick up some financial books. I'll put in Unshakable here in the chat from Tony Robbins, and Money Master the Game, and it's like 800 pages of reading between those two books. But if those two books were going to make it so you could increase your recommendation or increase your profit margin by just like tremendously, like that's the only reason I was able to take a $15 Facebook and turn it into a $73,000 in my account sale this month, was because of that knowledge. And most of you guys aren't going to make $75,000 in a year, let alone in one sale. So like you have to really be promoting yourself and pouring into yourself. And then you're going to be able to go from talking to these really broke final expense policies to all of a sudden having some intellectual financial conversations with some middle class mortgage protection families, to all of a sudden be able to educate wealthy people on their assets and understand where all their money's at. Because when someone starts telling you about their CD stocks, bonds, 401ks, IRAs, like, what do you know about the fees? What do you know about the markets where they're handling? What do you know about the volatility of their scenarios? What do you know about probate when it happens to their assets when they die and that stuff's not in a trust? Like, you don't know that stuff pouring out the gate, but if you don't read about it and then find someone to talk to about it, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And then those big deals that you're going to be doing are going to be referred to somebody else. And like, I'm absolutely here for you guys in the beginning, and I'm grateful to split a sale with you and run the whole thing and give you the education. But my ultimate goal for you is like, you're not going to need me more than 5 or 10 times. You read those books and you sit and get the education on there, like, you're going to be doing this stuff without me. But you have to learn. And I referred a lot of appointments out. I found someone that was really good at running these. I laced myself up with the game that I needed in terms of reading the books, and I've really poured in. Those are just 2 books, and if you guys read those ones, awesome. I'll give you more recommendations, but like, that's where to start. We are literally in a financial industry, and we are solving money problems for people. But
Yeah.
if you solve problems for poor people, you're going to get a poor return. You solve middle class problems, you'll get a middle class return. You
Mhm.
solve problems for wealthy people, you're going to get a wealthy return. So constantly be working on yourself harder than you are your business. If you're grinding 10, 12 hours a day, step back a little bit and grind 8 and read a book for an hour or 2. Like, that's going to profoundly increase your pay and value to the marketplace more than just grind, and do more of the same stuff.
Absolutely. Mic drop. And since we're on question asking training, the best question to ask every single time, no matter who you're sitting with, doesn't matter if you're in a trailer park or in a homeless shelter, you ask them, what do you have that might act like life insurance if needed? And if they're like, what do you mean? Oh, I'm talking about, do you have any old 401ks, IRAs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds that would pass along to your beneficiary if you were, or when you pass away? Uncovering what they have and passing it along to Hadley. Is that from a current or former employer? Do you have anything from a former employer? What is the purpose of this account? Does your company offer a match? Digging deeper obviously is a good way to uncover those bigger sales. But if you're already sitting, and like Hadley just posted his Calendly link, if you're already sitting with seniors, a lot of them, and we learned this from Rick Brooks, a lot of them have old 401ks. I think the statistic is like $1 trillion in old retirement accounts that are just sitting there. I mean, I literally am a perfect example. I have one. I mean, it's only like $2,000 in it, but like, when you leave an employer and you had a 401k with them, it's still sitting there.
Right.
So there's so many people that have these old 401ks from past employers, especially seniors that are already retired or about to retire, that we can really, really help them. So we got to just ask the questions. We can't pass up any opportunity when we're sitting with people. So everyone go ahead and save that link, and Hadley, you can post that in Slack too.
And real quick, Michaela, if I can, the other thing is, today with people in their careers, how many people do you think are going to have a 40-year career today? Nobody sticks in the same job for 40 years. So these cases are just going to increase by volume as our economy changes into a virtual landscape.
This question that I just dropped in the chat right here too, and it was just how Michaela asked that same question, only a little bit different wording. That question changed my income profoundly.
Mm-hmm.
It opened up so much opportunity, and that question was literally how I was referring people to the person that was a retirement specialist when I was actually learning this stuff. What do you have in place that acts as life insurance in the event you die without this coverage, such as IRAs, 401ks, checkings, or savings? Because those are usually like the 4 main objections you're going to get to if someone's already got it covered, right? So that question right there, and then you move on, you close your deal, and don't talk yourself out of a sale. But after you write that application, you go back and you circle back to, hey, Michaela, you know, earlier in this appointment, I asked you, what do you have in place to access life insurance in the event you die without this coverage? And you mentioned that you had like 40K in checkings and you had like 50 grand in an old 401K. I'm actually going to set up a time for a retirement specialist to give you a call so you can learn how to self-insure with that. What works better for you? 1:30 tomorrow or 4 o'clock? And I'm so assumptive. Like I was slinging deals left and right. Like it's assumptiveness is that's going to land you that. Like, I'm not even asking for your permission. Are you interested in talking to a retirement specialist? Of course you're not. So I'm going to be assumptive and say that you are, right? And so it's like, hey, Michaela, I noticed that you had that 401K and about 50,000 in savings as well. You know, I'm actually going to set up a time for my retirement specialist to give you a call and get you on his calendar. What would work better for you, 2 o'clock or 6:30? You know, and like you're already clicking on that link. You see my availability right there, and then you funnel an appointment my way, and then you can sit on that appointment and you get paid to learn.
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
great. Thank you guys for hopping on. Does anyone else have any last 2 cents they want to add?
I'm gonna help you protect that 401K with a couple grand in there, Michaela.
I'm like, what do I do with this? Like, it's just sitting there.
I think RPM goes down to like 5K, so you might be able to get like a few more qualified funds, start up an IRA, throw in $500 a month into that, and then when you have 5,000 in funds between your IRA and that 401K, you can use it to fund one annuity.
That's what, yeah, that's what Gage has like an Edward Jones account with his grandma. So she was like, we could always just like put that into his or into account like you just add a couple more. But yeah, you're right, like a Roth or something, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, if any of you guys have old 401ks too, like you should definitely look into that. That's a definite easy way to.
Yeah.
David, I think I need to talk to you about mine. I have one.
And yeah, and I'll actually tell you guys that too real quick. Like if you guys have family, like